to Building Bridges with Builders and Realtors. This is a co-sponsored event with Greater Tampa Realtors and the Tampa Bay Builders Association. So we're very excited to work together to be able to bring you guys some information on working with builders and realtors together. Before we go ahead and get started, I'm going to turn this over to our moderator for the day, but I just want to go over a few of our administrative little rules here. So we do have our Q&A function. If you hover over your screen, you should see a little option for Q&A or question and answer. If you have any questions throughout the panel, as we're kind of discussing, go ahead and type your question into the Q&A function. And we'll be able to address those towards the end here. And then the other little option here, I can see that we have some people chatting away in the chat box, which is fabulous. But if you just have any comments or you want to say hi, go ahead and use the chat box. But just remember, if you have a question that you'd like to ask anybody on the panel, make sure to use the Q&A feature, because that chat box can really start flying up and we might miss your question if you put it just into the chat box. So go ahead and take a look at both of those options. And with that, I am going to turn it over to our moderator for this morning. We have Kathy Tucker with us from Kathy Tucker Coaching. Take it away, Kathy.
Thanks, Grace. Thank you very much. And yes, I'm Kathy Tucker, and I'm honored to be here today to moderate this panel. So thank you for inviting me to do so. And it's interesting because this is, I think, a really great time to be having this conversation, to build bridges between realtors and builders. Because if you think about what's happening in the market right now, and Maria and I were talking about this yesterday, our inventories levels are down to about a 1.9 month supply of inventory. And so a lot of agents today are looking to the builders to provide some product for their buyers, right? Which is, which makes sense. But what's happening sometimes too is there's a little bit of a roadblock or a friction, because sometimes the realtors, they're not sure of what the protocol is with the different builders. And the last thing they want to do is, have their buyer, spend all this time with their buyer and then due to some technicality, lose the sale, right? And then the builders, on the other hand, we're trying to, sell as many homes as we can at as high of a profit margin as possible, because our costs keep going up and up and up. And sometimes we're afraid that the realtor may come in and prohibit that from happening. So, and we may even lose the sale. So there's some friction and there's some roadblocks sometimes. So what I think is great about this is, to really take the time to share perspectives, to educate one another, ultimately to bridge the gap between realtors and builders, so that we can all sell more homes and do it in a way where we're taking good care of the customer, but also in a way where we're being efficient. And I want to share with you a quick story about two different salespeople. One is a longtime builder representative, another is a realtor. And they both really figured out how to establish the relationships and leverage their time by, forging relationships with each other. So the salesperson was a builder rep. He had been he worked for me for, 20 plus years, and he was a master salesperson. But what made him really valuable to us as a builder was when we went to go open a new community and we really needed some extra sales, or we were kind of struggling with the month and we needed more sales, we would call Kenny Matthews, and we'd say, Kenny, what can you do for us? And you know what? He had such a group of a realtor network that he would just send the SOS almost out to his realtors, and voila, we had all these sales. I mean, he was so valuable to us, and for him, it's part of why he always exceeded his quotas. So that was Kenny on the builder side. And then this other friend of mine, Dale Miller, on the realtor side, he was one of the top-notch realtors in North Carolina, but he spent so much time on the golf course. And, I said to him, I said, Dale, how do you do this? And he said, well, I'll tell you, I have realized that selling new homes is so easy that I have established so many relationships with different builders that when I have a buyer, I pretty much just take them to the builders and let the builders do the work. And he said, it's so easy because there's not all the inspections, there's not as many surprises, it's just simple. And then the buyers are happy, and then they send me more referrals. So the reason I share this story with everybody is because when you think about it, these two folks have been able to build their businesses and leverage their time because they have forged really great relationships with, between realtors and builders. And I think everybody can do that. It's just a matter of us really having a good understanding of one another and how we can, help each other and help our customers at the same time. So what I hope we can accomplish here today is to speak candidly and listen to one another so that we can build a better understanding of each other's perspectives. And I'm hoping that by sharing this information with the realtors we have here and the builders we have here, we'll be able to bridge the gap and help the agents, the resale agents, have a better understanding of how to work with builders, and help the builders have a better understanding of what some of the realtors' challenges are, so that we can find ways to work together even better. Does that sound good? Good. Okay, so I'm going to start by introducing our panelists, and we have some very amazing panelists here today. So I'm going to actually ask you guys to introduce yourselves first, and I'm going to start with the builders. So Nathan, can you start and just give us about, a little bit about you and your background and who you work with?
Yeah, I'm Nathan Horvath. I'm the area sales manager for Mattamy Homes. I've been with Mattamy Homes for about 7 years and been the manager over there for about 4. I come originally from Syracuse, New York, and I've been in the building industry for about 20 years now, and have worked with Meritage and Pulte, and now have found my forever home at Mattamy.
Yay, good for you. All right, Cheryl, you're next.
Hi, I'm Cheryl McCormick Brown. I'm with Park Square Homes. I have personally been in the home building business in sales and marketing leadership capacity for over 20 years now in the Tampa Bay market. I've worked with some of the big nationals and some of the private home builders. I've been part of the TBBA SMC for all of those 20 years in some shape or capacity. It's been quite the ride, but very exciting. Very excited to be here.
Thank you, Cheryl. We're lucky to have you. And then we have Brian on the builder side.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Solano. I'm with MI Homes in the Tampa division. I'm the sales manager here. I've been with MI for about a little over 7 years. Been in the new home industry since around 2000. So 20 years experience in the Tampa area, and looking forward to today's discussion.
Yay, thank you, Brian. Good to have you. All right, let's see, on the realtor side, Rick, can you go first?
Okay. Good morning. I'm Rick Deaton with REMAX Premier Group. I've been a licensed agent for about 17 years here in the Tampa market. Work with my wife and partner at REMAX. We're a team. And I started out as she did with builders, and was an on-site agent for about 10 years with 3 different builders here in the Tampa market. And joined my wife about 7 years ago, and more or less as a builder's agent, or I'm sorry, as a buyer's agent. And so I think I have a different perspective than maybe a lot of realtors who have never worked for builders, kind of see the builder side of things. And I think that helps me with my clients and understanding what the builder's needs are, as well as the buyers.
Yeah, that's great. Great to have your perspective, Rick. This is terrific. And Marie, how about for you?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marie Polo with Keller Williams Tampa Properties. I began my real estate career in the early 70s and was immediately attracted to new construction selling. For over 30 years, my husband Mario and I owned and operated ERA, the Polo Group, located in Carrollwood. I was a top producer. I both listed and sold for the majority of that time, except for the 3 years I worked with Florida Design Communities in Sun City Center in Walden Lakes, located in Plant City, selling new homes for the builder developer. During that time, Mario and I also were co-owners of Bay Harbor Homes, specializing on your lot building. In 2000, we opened up the Mall House, located in both the Citrus Park Mall and the Brandon Malls, specializing in new construction sales. In 2010, we were bought out by Nikki U. Baldini. I, along with my business partner, Deborah Marina, oversee her new homes division.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Marie. Hey, it's great to have you all here. And what I'm really excited about is to have the depth of experience and expertise from both sides. And what is also great is between Rick and Marie, you both have, like you said, you have the builder knowledge as well as the realtor knowledge, which I think is going to be really helpful for our listeners today. So that's great. Thank you all for joining me. And I'll introduce myself here for a second. I'm Kathy Tucker, and I own a boutique sales and leadership training company, and I am a sales and leadership coach, and I specialize in working only with the new home industry and the real estate industry. And just a little bit about my background, I've been in the business for over 30 years. I started in new home sales for a large builder, and I worked my way up to division president and loved it. While I was there, I was broker in charge for about 20 years. So I had a lot of interaction between the realtor and the builder, and handled a lot of issues that had come up. I then, after a restructuring with our company, I was laid off, which I know there's a lot of that's happened out there recently. So I was laid off, and I came to Florida, and I thought I was going to retire, and decided I'm not ready. So I started working with Cal Atlantic, which is where I met a lot of you. I was the VP of sales there. And then after about a year, I decided to go out on my own and start my coaching company, so I can really focus on I do one-on-one coaching with salespeople and sales leaders, and I offer virtual sales training workshops for salespeople and virtual sales leadership masterminds called 9 Steps to Leading a Rockstar Sales Team. So I can help sales managers be able to create an environment where their salespeople excel without having to be there 100% of the time. So that's a little bit about me. And so I'm very fortunate to be here today to work with everybody and really help us be able to foster relationships with both sides, if you will, and bridge the gap between the realtors and the builders. So let's start with our agenda. We have about 45 minutes for questions for the panelists, and then we're going to open it up to our listeners. So if you do have questions, you can type them in the chat. For the most part, we'll answer the questions at the end, but if we are able to, and you have a question that's relevant to the topic at hand, we'll see if we can get to that as well. I have a list of questions here that have been supplied by a group of people as we're trying to hear what kind of questions are out there. So I have some questions, and I'm going to direct them to the builders and the realtors. And ultimately, we're trying to get multiple perspectives for each question. Okay, so that's how I'm going to do this. We have 5 categories that we're working with. We're going to talk about registration. We're going to talk about contracts and negotiations, commissions, expectations, and then some general topics. Okay, let's start with registration policies. So builders typically have a process to follow when it comes to including the real estate agents on the contracts. And they typically require that the agents register their clients with the builder on their first visit. And they also sometimes require that they accompany them at time of contract. But not all builders have the same policy, and sometimes 2 site agents from the same builder may even handle the policy differently. So the first question is going to go to our builder rep, Nathan. Nathan, what is the typical registration policy, and what are your recommendations for the realtors?
Okay, the typical policy on that is that it's one of 2 different ways we handle it. If you're just going to come up on site without letting us know you're going to be there, we ask that the realtor be with the customer at that actual time. What we do ask is, if you can't be there, we would ask that you call the on-site person and let them know if you're just sending your clients there, or even if your clients have gone and you don't know they've gone and you find out they have gone, to please call and then notify our on-site agents so that we can include you in that process. The other side of it, another way that we handle registration is online. So at any time, if you go to our website, we have an 800 number on there. You call that number and you talk to our online registration folks, and they will set up an appointment for the person on site, and they will add into our system the information as far as who the realtor is and customers' names and a little bit of information as far as what they're looking for. You mentioned that sometimes people have different on site might have a different way of handling that. And, you know, a lot of times that's kind of how people handle rules in general. Some people are very black and white, and hey, our rule is you have to have the realtor there on the first visit. And that could be a little difficult, but from a Mattamy Homes perspective, we love real estate agents, and we will always work with you if we don't see you on that first day, but we would ask that you communicate to us in some way so that we know you're part of the process.
Okay, that's great. That's very helpful. Rick, what are your thoughts on that, and how familiar are most agents on the policies, and, you know, what can be done to improve their understanding of those policies?
Well, I think in general, most agents, if they've had any experience at all with new construction, understand that in general, all builders want you to accompany your buyer on that first visit. I think with the amount of information that is free flowing now, real estate agents aren't the keeper of the information like they were years and years ago. So our buyers can be a little bit difficult to control. You work with them, maybe talking to them as inventory levels are really low, and planting those seeds that you may want to consider new construction. Sell your home, rent for a year while yours is being built, if that's, you know, the need. But sometimes they go out, very often they go out without the agent because they think they're wasting their time. They're not sure what they want to do. Everybody loves to go look at models. That's why builders build them. People buy what they see. So I think the different nuances that the builders have, I think, can be a little bit challenging for agents to remember. You know, like Mattamy seems to have a much more reasonable and liberal approach to the consideration of a realtor on a contract. And just like Nathan said, some builders are very black and white about it. So that offers challenges. It's just the very differences and the nuances. But in general, I think most builders' policies are very similar.
Yeah, Rick, to that point, would it be helpful if the builders had a handout or something that really specified their policies on registration and just what their policies were from registration to close?
Yeah, I think that could help. I think that could also create an issue where, say, Nathan he's got a handout, but then he's turning around and having to consider a certain circumstance of whether that agent should or should not be included because they didn't come in. What were those circumstances? Makes it kind of tough then to make those kind of judgment decisions, but you got something in black and white.
Right.
So I think yes, it can help educate the general realtors, but it can also maybe make it a little more limiting as to what the builder can consider outside of that handout.
Yeah, you know what? What we often say as managers is we deal in the gray, right? And it's, yes, there's black and white, but there's also situations that arise, and we have to figure out what's the best solution for everybody. So yeah, thank you for that insight. Similarly, Brian, a question for you. When a realtor does not accompany the buyer on the first or subsequent meetings, and typically the first is the one that we want them to be, you know, accompanying them especially. But anyway, when they don't accompany the buyer on the first or subsequent meetings, sometimes it can lead to misunderstandings and miscommunications. How can builders and agents avoid this?
Yeah, I think it's definitely recommended that the realtor to attempt to make it out to the first visit, to the, with the client. So if for some reason that does not happen, I mean, it comes down to communication, obviously, and that communication needs to happen as soon as possible. You don't want to wait to make that communication. The realtor should contact the builder's representative or the community that the customer visited, let them know that it's their client. The more you communicate, the sooner you communicate, and the quicker we get out of that gray area, right? So we can at least make sure the realtor's protected, and we love realtors too at MI Homes, and we want to make sure that we work together, not against each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very true. Just a quick note, I see some chats, and if you do have questions that are relevant to the topic, please put it in the Q&A category, because that's what we can see more easily than the chats. So thank you. Thanks for doing that. All right, let me, let's see. I'm gonna move to another question that's similar, and then we'll come back to you, Brittany. Marie, this kind of falls in line with some of what Brian and Nathan were both talking about. Since that there's so many different variables, and one of those variables is a lot of times prospects or customers will find the builder online first, right? Because we're in a virtual world, and they're just sitting at home surfing, right? So if they discover, a builder's homes via the internet first, and they begin talking to and registering with that builder, and with that online sales counselor for that builder, actually, how does that impact you, and what can builders do to avoid alienating the realtor community if the buyer goes directly to the builder?
I definitely agree with what Nathan has said, and Rick and Brian. It's all about communication, and it's definitely about communication with your clients. I think the situation kind of sometimes gets going sideways is when, again, the clients have visited online prior to starting to work with you, the realtor, and like you said, with technology nowadays, I mean, and the younger they are, they're surfing on their phone. They don't even have to be in front of a computer. And once you start searching for homes, then you start receiving all these pop-ups. And that's another thing that, you're going to be inundated with. So, so getting back to, with clients that have registered online, talk with the online sales people, registered and what have you, that can be somewhat challenging, okay? Because then, again, that's where the gray area may come in, is that you have to establish that, your relationship with this client, as to, because sometimes it boils down to, who is the true procuring cause over here. And some builders are much tighter with their policies than others, as we do find out, particularly if that client's name has been put into their database, and say a appointment has already been set with the client going out there, and maybe they have already gone out there. They just went that whole route without a realtor. And then when they get closer to making the decision, all of a sudden they want buyer representation. So, all that comes into play. And going back to the bottom line to all this, is all about communication and having the relationships that you have to establish beforehand with the on-site agents to better know how to handle this, when the situation comes up. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes it has to go back to the sales manager, to get them involved. But again, the builders, they want your business. I'm all about new home sales. And so that is always first on my radar, period. I go for new construction first, then it's the resales after that. And there's reasons for that too. Mm-hmm. But
So that all makes sense. What a question came in that I thought I would ask the builders about this, because I do think this is very relevant. And they talked about, and this kind of goes to, Brian, what you and Nathan were both saying, and Cheryl, you may be able to add into this too. And her question is about the first visit. You know, typically the builder requires them to, the realtor to accompany on the first visit. But what if the buyer says, you know, they go into the first day to the builders and they say, I have an agent, and they're just shopping first to find location or to, you know, just see a little bit more about the builders. And then they bring in a realtor and the realtor is present the rest of the way. Would that realtor typically be counted and be a part of the contract?
So I could take that. Yeah, I mean, if the customer and the client comes in and tells us that they're working with an agent, we have a registration form. We ask them who the agent is, and we'll fill that registration form out with the buyer and the realtor who the client says that he's working with, he or she's working with. Now, keep in mind, if you don't accompany the client, you got to be careful. The client could give us a different realtor name. We don't know, right? They're telling us who they're working with. And then another agent could call us and say, hey, that was my client. They came in to visit. And we're like, well, they gave us this realtor's name. So we have to, that's why it's best to communicate up front and also accompany the buyer if you can, at least for that first visit. If you can't, I understand today's technology makes it easy to communicate. So as long as the communication is there, we as MI Homes will protect the realtor that is either being told who they're working with, you know, up front, and we'll do that for them.
Yeah,
I'll second that to what Brian said. Our sales team is trained to ask up front. It's part of the registration process. You know, are you working with a realtor? So it goes both ways. It also protects the realtor that is working with the buyer should they, as Brian mentioned, you know, produce another realtor down the road during the buying process. It also protects them up front.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And a message came in on the chat saying that, you know, what a lot of agents will do is give their buyers some of their cards so that if they are out, you know, shopping different builders, they can at least share that card with the site agent, and then the site agent can stay in connection with the realtor, which I think is, you know, is a good way to do it if they're unable to be there at all times. So I think that's really good.
Kathy, I want to say too that I think it's important that you have the conversation with your clients, how you work. You know, don't assume that they know. And, you know, and you're asking for their loyalty, because certainly you're going to put the time in for them. And I think once they see that, you know, you take that extra special, put them in that extra special situation, you care, it's all about them, that brings about a whole different clarity, you know, to the working relationship too. But again, it's all about relationships with the clients and with the on-site agents.
It's true. The relationships make a difference. And the more we can bridge that gap and build these relationships, and the more everybody can realize is that's what it takes is communication, and that, hey, we all care about the same thing. And that is helping the customer find a home that's going to work for them and getting a sale, right? Okay, let's move on to contracts and negotiating. And this goes to Cheryl first. Why is it typically required to use the builder's contract?
So really, it just is. When you sell builders' homes, you use the builder's contracts. It ensures that all parties are in agreement with what is being, you know, with what's being built. If it's an inventory, what options are included. The builder's contract also provides a guide, you know, to follow the critical path in terms of the construction process. It's specific to the individual builder's processes. On a positive note, we're doing all the paperwork and putting it all together, which makes it that much easier for the realtor community. Builder sales are just so much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. And Rick, your thoughts on that? You know, the builder's contracts are different from the FAR bar contracts, of course. You know, is that a concern for agents or for buyers?
Well, it shouldn't be. If an agent, if you're discussing with your client, and like Marie talked about, building that relationship, you should have already discuss that subject with them. If you go new construction, they have their own contract, and having written a bunch of those contracts over a 10-year period, you understand why that contract's structured the way it is. They're doing 3 different things possibly for a buyer. They can build them a new home from dirt up. They can sell them a home that is under some stage of construction already, an inventory, and they can sell them a completed inventory home.
Mm-hmm.
They have one contract that suits all 3 of those circumstances. And I explain when someone's looking at an inventory home that the contract's that thick. You're going to use about this much of it, because 2/3 of it's not even going to apply because of a completed home. But like Cheryl said, those contracts are structured for the specific kind of real estate business they do, and therein lies a lot more contractual obligations on the part of the buyer for performance, things they have to do. These are things we don't get into in general real estate. You're buying a resale. So the contract is not written the way it's written to confound anybody or be a roadblock or anything of that nature. It's structured the way it is for the type of business that they're in. So it shouldn't be a problem. It just needs to be explained properly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is about explaining it. And ultimately, the fact of the matter is the builders' contracts are written in a way to protect the builders. Let's just be real about it. And that's part of what we have to accept. And builders are typically not going to allow the FAR bar contract because it doesn't have the same disclosures. And so I think you're right. The agents have to become familiar with it and realize that's part of the process. Like what Cheryl was saying, there is a process, right?
I think too, Kathy, this is where an agent who is well versed in the new construction side can be an asset to the builder, because there's that automatic a bit of a wall that's built up between the buyer and the on-site sales agent, because they are sales, in the strictest definition of the term. And you tend to pull back as a buyer because you're hearing a salesperson tell you all these things. It helps to have someone that they've developed a relationship, trust relationship with, to explain that this contract's not out to get you. It has to be structured this way because there's a lot more moving parts, and the builder has to be protected. It is written to protect the builder, but it needs to be structured that way. There's a lot of things going on that the builder has to do. And I tell people, look, there's performance requirements for you, there's performance requirements for the builder. If everybody does what they're supposed to do, after today, when we sign this, it'll kind of go in the drawer. It'll never be brought out again unless somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. Very good. All right, thank you. So we're going to move on to some other elements of contracts and negotiating, which we had a few questions that were relative to this. So to Brian on our builder side, some builders negotiate the price and some don't, but often realtors suggest the buyers make an offer. What's your perspective on the realtors negotiating the price for the buyer, and how do you recommend it be managed to create a win-win for everybody?
Well, I think, again, it kind of communication starts with, so at least communicate, the realtors should understand the processes. And then from that standpoint, the realtor presenting the offer, I think, is absolutely fine to the salesperson that's working for the builder. Doesn't need to be on a FAR bar or anything like that. Obviously, we have our own contract, so we don't need an offer in writing. We need some verbal or email or some type of offer so it can be presented to management at that point. Obviously, if the realtor understands the process, the buyer will have a better experience going through that process, rather than sending a FAR bar and then we're telling them, well, we don't need the FAR bar, right? We have our own contract, and that at least they understand that. But as far as as far as making it a win-win, I think that as a builder, we want the realtor to look good, first of all. So if they present the offer and we work with them to come up to an agreement on a figure that works for all parties, then I think the buyer wins and the realtor wins.
Okay. Cheryl or Nathan, do you want to add anything to that?
Just to know your audience and realize that from a builder's perspective, a lot of times realtors will come in and think there's a lot of room to negotiate if we do negotiate as a builder. And to put it in a perspective, our company last year made $6 million on 600 homes. So we only really, in technicality, made about 10 grand a house is a reality. So we don't have a lot of room when we're trying to end the overall spectrum. Now, in some houses we make more and some less. So we aren't able to wheel and deal like a lot of people think we can.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. A lot of times I think agents do think and buyers think that there's huge, profit margins. And for the most part, that's not really the case, especially as our costs continue to go up, so, that's a really good point, Nathan. Cheryl, I see you shaking your head. Did you want to add it?
Completely agree. And you kind of touched on the second point too, as costs continue to go up, so do, profit market margins continue to shrink, but there isn't a lot of room there. And we are working with what we have. And, I think that's about saying.
Yeah.
It should probably be said.
Right. Marie, did you have anything to add relative to negotiations, and negotiating with the buyers or for the buyers?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things right now that most of us, again, that are, in the business and keeping up with the numbers and all, that during these COVID times, the resale inventory is extremely, extremely low. And, at, I don't know, whatever the norm was, or, there's normally, I don't know, $10,000 to $12,000 or 10,000 to 12,000 homes on the market, and right now there's a little over half of that. All right. And so therefore that has driven a lot of people now to reach out to look at the builders' homes, which is a great thing, and I think that's part of what, we're wanting this little, session to be about too, is again, there is such value in showing builders' homes. And it's, again, it's an easy sale. But getting back to the negotiating part, one thing I want to say, and again, you have to kind of prep your clients also, because they are going to want you to present an offer. They expect you to present an offer, but you need to kind of discuss this offer situation. They're not going to get a steal, builders, and like y'all were saying, you've got your profits, your margins, your spreads, your, everything that has to be accounted for here. But the one place that I find that, a builder is not going to budge much, if any, is on the sales price of the home. And here again, because of the cost and materials and labor and everything going up too. But the other thing too is that if a person comes in yesterday and buys a home for X number of dollars, a person comes in the following day and buys that same identical home and they get it for much less, you're messing with the comps of that neighborhood now, And as realtors, I think that's another part of this, that hopefully the homes that you sell, whether they're resales or new construction, those are going to be future listings of yours. And you hope to keep that relationship up with these clients, that you're going to be their realtor for life, kind of thing. And as time goes by so fast, be the realtor for their kids, because that's how fast kids grow up and everything too. But there's a lot that goes into that. But I'm just saying, don't lead your clients to believe they're gonna have a drastic reduction in the price of the homes.
I think that's a great point, Marie. I think it's a lot about setting appropriate expectations. And I think the builders need to set some expectations, the realtors need to set some expectations, because the last thing we want is this fight where it ends up, making everybody feel like the process has been a horrible process. And that's not the point. And to your point also, Marie, we don't want to have all kinds of discrepancies within a given neighborhood, you know. And nowadays, like you also mentioned, you know, there's not a lot of inventory out there. So the truth is, builders don't have to negotiate. You know, they have something that's really special, especially if they have inventory. There's a lot of builders who are saying, I'm not offering any negotiations on my inventory because, you know, I can't even keep them on the ground. So we have to realize that, and that's part of our business. So very good. I'm going to keep rolling because with the next topic is one that I think is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, and that has to do with commissions and bonuses. So commissions and bonuses are structured differently with different builders, and so we're going to get into some detail about, you know, about that, and about what's the impact of different commissions and how to navigate the commission conversations. So, you know, and sometimes this topic can be a little controversial. So let's just remember that we're asking for perspectives and we're here to learn. So to Rick, I want to ask this to you first. So there have been some lowering of real estate commissions in the marketplace from 3% realtor commissions to 2.5%, and in some cases even 2%, where the builders are reducing their commission structures. How do you as a realtor view that? And does that impact where you take your clients? And by the way, we're going to give the builders an opportunity to talk about this as well. So Rick, can you share with us your thoughts on that?
Well, from the perspective of does it affect where I take my clients?
Right.
No, it doesn't. If I'm looking at new construction with a buyer, however, and I have builder A that is not slashing commissions by as much as 33%, and I have builder B who is, and they both offer a solution to my buyer. We're independent contractors as well. We have a business to operate, and we're our own CEOs, our own COOs, and especially our own CFOs. And so we look at that as well. I do not ever, though, look at commission. Now, however, there's some agents that do that. But again, this is an 80-20 business. 80% of the business is done by 20% of the realtors. And if you're in that 20%, you're probably not one of those shopping commissions to determine where you take your clients. I think it's unethical. And I think it's unfortunate that we even have to deal with it. I get where it comes from. We're in that kind of market. We're in a seller's market, and the builders are the sellers, and so they see an opportunity to squeeze a little extra profit. They're in a lot of cases the only game in town. It's funny how some of the policies that some builders, none of which are on this panel today, I'm happy to say, some builders have recently changed some policies, made it even tougher. Tougher to be registered with your buyer, locking people out of the system once they register someone. And then COVID hits, and all of a sudden all that great traffic dries up. And then we get emails. We're offering this bonus. You can register your client virtually or remotely, and all of a sudden everything changed. So I think that kind of speaks to the environment we're in. When things are really, really good, we see this. This is a cyclical thing. This isn't something that just happened in this iteration. Marie, I'm sure you've seen it all the time you've been in this business. It's a cyclical thing. And when things get good, it gets a little tougher on us. When things slow down, all of a sudden we become their best friend. So I get it. I'm not that happy about it, but business is good, and we'll do well as they do well. But yeah, it's not appreciated in the real estate community. I can promise you that realtors don't like it.
Sure. Nathan, I think we all can understand that perspective, right? Can you share from the builder side the perspective on reducing commission rates? And I'm not saying that you all have reduced. I'm not, I'm not saying that at all. But what's your perspective on reducing commission rates? And can you help us understand why sometimes this can happen?
Yeah, it's a two-part scenario. We at Mattamy have not reduced commissions, and we do not intend to. and we've actually had tiered programs in the past and try to really boost the commissions we pay to realtors. But there's two different aspects. One of the aspects is it can be a legitimate reason to reduce it. Let's say the land that someone purchased as a builder is a little bit more than they expected. In order to remain competitive in the marketplace with the house price that's correct, you got to find a way to cut some money in the transaction to make it work. If you have possibly purchased something for a little more than you should have. And so the people behind the scenes looking at the numbers will say, well, what if we cut this? And what if we drop this? And so that can be a legitimate reason for trying to reduce the overall commissions out there. The opposite side is just, it could be, if things are going well and the builder's doing great, it could be something to just actually make more profit. But oftentimes it is a result of possibly paying a little bit too much for land or something along those lines, where they have to try to figure out a way to make the numbers work. Otherwise the prices will be too high and they won't sell any homes. So it's ultimately for the customer is where you're trying to get to that right price point to be able to sell the homes.
Right. Yeah. And due to a lot of the changes in regulations in Tampa, builders' costs have gone up substantially. And, they've gone up a lot faster than the cost of homes has. So I think there's also some scenarios there where, like you said, builders are trying to go to market at a market price, and they've got to squeeze every little piece of it in some cases to be able to still make an acceptable margin. And a lot of times, just so some of the agents know too, builders are also, responding to their banks. And a lot of builders won't get some of their construction loans if they're not meeting certain financial margins on their products. So there's another reason why sometimes, like you said, Nathan, it's sometimes as a cost structure, and they're trying to figure out a way to be able to maximize. That being said, other times it simply is a demand scenario, and they're saying, hey, look, I've got a really special piece of ground and nobody else has it. And, I feel like I can, the agents are going to find it and the buyers are going to find it and buy it, regardless of what the commissions are. And sometimes that happens too. So I get that. Anything else that Cheryl or Brian, you want to add to that topic? We good?
No, we're looking for ways to, add bonuses where we can. And as you said, with impact fees, I could see why some builders might need to make that adjustment based on where they're at, but.
Right. So speaking of bonuses and commissions, this question goes to you, Marie. So some builders are offering tiered commission structures, or they're offering bonus programs where the more an agent sells of a specific builder's homes, the higher their commission structure. That's actually the tiered structure. And sometimes they offer, bonuses on specific homes, like on a home of the month. What do you like better, and what's your thoughts on that? And I know we're at about 10:49 and we have a couple other topics. So we're going to if we could try to keep this fairly short, that would be great.
Okay. Actually, I like both these scenarios.
Okay.
And I think the tiered commissions are a reward program that are open to all realtors. Okay. Featuring Home of the Month will draw, I think, less realtors without that, possibly tiered commission, since not all realtors say will have a buyer for that particular home that they're maybe featuring. But I think all realtors will strive harder, and I see it happening, to show more homes, to sell more homes with the incentive of tiered commissions, okay? And another thing that, we haven't touched on yet, but I'm just gonna throw it out here and then I'm just gonna move on. But also remember, there are buyers' incentives as well. And, everyone needs to have that conversation with the new home counselors as to what is currently being offered. So along with the realtors, remember, there's buyers' incentives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Nathan, here's another topic that can be kind of tough, but it sometimes does happen. Sometimes realtors are told by their clients that the on-site agent will say, without a realtor, you can get a better deal. And we had a question that came in that said, does the site agent make less if a realtor's on the deal? So can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, from a Mattamy perspective, if one of my sales agents says that to someone, I need to be contacted immediately because we do not agree with that. We do not approve that, and it should never be said. A lot of times you'll get that from somebody who might be new in the industry who just is grasping at straws to find a way to try to get a deal to work, and will do whatever they can. So we are against that policy completely. The sales agent on site has a set commission. It's always the same. And so whether there's a realtor or not, it doesn't affect us in any way. That's why we encourage realtors to be there and represent the clients. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. Rick, any thoughts on that?
Well, I can say that for the 3 builders that I worked for, that certainly was not the policy, nor would it been tolerated. One of the builders even went further to explain that the money that comes from paying realtor commissions comes from a marketing account, doesn't come from the actual cost of the home.
Right.
That's all, bean counter stuff. But at the end of the day, it comes from the bottom line of the company. But I think it's never, I've never experienced it being a policy of a builder to agree with Nathan's perspective. I think you get salespeople that having exhausted attempts to close the deal might see that as a last ditch way to make a sale. And I agree, any sales manager I ever worked for would want to know that if that's what's going on. But I think that's the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah, good. I think the same thing. And, that's when I think that if we hear our sales team members saying that, then we talk about it and say, okay, we need to train them. We need to, 1, make sure they know this is not tolerated, and 2, help them understand how to build value in their pricing, right? Because the home is worth the price. So,
well, it would be short-sighted on the builder's part to
absolutely.
have that as a policy anyway, because 70 to 80% of most builder sales involve a realtor. Why would you want to alienate that many people? Because, it's kind of like the whole thing with good news and how it travels versus bad news. Let one realtor have that happen to them, and the entire GTAR knows about it.
That's right. That's right. That's the problem.
That all goes into business planning up front at the beginning of the year. Builders take that into consideration. And as you mentioned, that comes out of a marketing bucket. It's just cost of doing business. And we anticipate a certain percentage of our deals to have realtor participation. And, it's the same price with or without a realtor.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's how most builders do it. It's part of their plan. They figure out what the typical percentage is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep moving on expectations. Cheryl, this one goes to you. When a realtor is taking their clients to a new home community, how does the builder typically want to handle the sales process, and how much time should the agent allow so the on-site agent can properly, spend time discovering needs and presenting their products?
Well, and so obviously there's some variables that would dictate the amount of time, but I would say 1.5, 2 hours to be on the safe side at a minimum, to allow the on-site agent time to discuss needs, demonstrate the models, narrow down the plan, talk about availability and options, actually walk home sites and run numbers. Often the realtor has done their homework ahead of time and previewed the community and some of the floor plans, kind of narrowing down the field and, taking their buyer's time into consideration. Obviously if we went to contract, you need to factor in a little bit more time, but most builders have gone paperless, e-signature, e-contracts that can be, time consuming in the past, but can be emailed out, kind of shortening that field. But, really once the realtor and the buyer walk into the new home sales office, they can just, I don't mean step aside entirely, but, let the new home sales agent do what they've been trained to do and showcase the homes and help the buyer and help the realtor help the buyer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rick, does that sound reasonable to you?
Yeah, when I worked for various builders, one of the first things that I would do when someone came in with an agent is I'd ask them, how much time do you have to spend with us today? Mm-hmm. That way I don't sound like I'm trying to run through the script that most builders want their sales agents to be consistent using. You're going through a builder story and talking about the community, and then talking about what they offer and the way of amenities and features and advantages and benefits, and the whole sales presentation. It takes time.
Yeah.
Knowing how some agents bring their people in, it's like you're in the middle of the day, and they got 4 more places. And I've actually had agents come in and say, when I was in a model, 2 minutes into the whole thing is, okay, we've got to go. We've got an appointment to go look at this or that at such time. Creates a little bit of awkwardness. I think if you kind of anticipate, if it hasn't been predetermined through a phone call, find out how much time they have to spend, and then know that if they say, well, we've got some other place we've got to go to, we have a pretty tight schedule today, then have your tidbits of information that you think are important to get out to them, and use it as an opportunity to set another appointment to get them back in there. And that gives you an opportunity to touch them again.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Yeah, I think planning is important, and also communicating is important, so that way everybody knows what to expect. To that same point, Brian, the next question goes to you. When agents bring prospects to your communities, how much do you expect them to know about your builder's construction and your builder's product and, and your community and all that? What are you expecting them to know?
So I think it's important for agents to know the community as far as amenities, price points, and products that are in the community. You'd hate an agent to come in and look for a 200 price point, and we're starting at 300, right? So that right there it's not a win-win at that point. So as far as construction goes, it's not bad to know some of the basics of it. I don't think that they need to be experts on construction. Let the new home sales consultants, explain the construction process. We all do few things different for certain reasons. And I think that rely on the salesperson for the construction part of it. But as far as knowledge, just the basics, I think maybe preview, even if it's a phone call or even online, and go on the websites and understand this community does have an amenity center. This community has, this price point. So you're familiar with that before you bring a client out.
Right. And I think most of them they've done a little bit of homework, so because they don't want to waste their time either. They want to bring them to places that would be true possibilities for the buyer. But I think the key that you're saying is they don't have to be experts on the community or experts on construction. And like Cheryl mentioned earlier, it's okay if they kind of step aside and let the site agents take over, because the site agents, are typically trained on how to discover needs and then present their products in a way that's going to be advantageous to the buyer. So, that makes sense. Marie, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree with everything that's been said there, because it's pretty much hit on all the points that I was going to bring out here. But definitely, I don't think you need to know hardly anything about construction, because every builder is different anyway. We have a real estate license. We don't have a general contractor's license.
Right.
So kind of stay in your lane when it comes to construction talk. And that's what the new home consultants are trained to do. So let them address and answer all questions of that nature. Mm-hmm. And again, also, as far as my expectations of taking a client to a builder, is that I just want them to be really enthusiastic, in welcoming me and my clients. I think, that first impression with all of us, it's that nonverbal thing in the first 7 seconds. Everyone always forms an opinion of you, good, bad, or indifferent. But enthusiasm is contagious. So I like that. And then at that point, I have always stepped back and let them take over to do their thing. And Cheryl, that goes along with all those things that you named, that, again, all the on-site agents are trained to do. And also that client is now, their client is along with yours, okay? So again, trust those on-site agents. They want to make a sale as much as you do. And by all means, at this point, I step back. I let them do their thing now. And I am looking for them to go all the way from point A to point B to closing this client. And when it gets to that point and, you know, the buyer is showing all these signs of wanting to buy, let the buyer buy. Don't stop and say, we got, you know, more homes to see. And that's one of the biggest things that we hear day after day going in and out of whatever model center it is. That is our most frustrating challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So
Great
let
point.
the buyer buy.
Great point on both ends, right? On both ends, we want to make sure that
Absolutely.
happens. That sounds great. Thank you. Well, I know we're coming up on 11 o'clock. I have just a couple other questions. So if everybody's all right with it, we'll take a few more minutes and see if we can answer these questions. Is the panel okay? We're good with that? Okay. So this one goes to Rick. Most builders expect that their site agents are going to follow up with the prospects on a regular basis. But sometimes site agents feel that the realtors don't want the site agents to talk to their clients. You know, would you agree with this? And, you know, if so, how can we bridge that gap?
Well, I think there needs to be a mutual respect. Like Marie was saying, this on-site sales agents have a job to do. Their job is to take it from that introduction of the builder and the community and their plans to closing the transaction. We don't want to be an obstruction to that. And on the same hand, I think the builder rep needs to respect the fact that they are working with an agent and we have a job to do in regards to responsibilities to our buyer, and they should include us in those conversations. I personally don't have any problem with the sales agent, on-site sales agent following up with my client. I would appreciate being included on the emails and that sort of thing so that I'm in the know and can help facilitate if this actually is the best place for my buyer to land. You know, why wouldn't they want me included in that process to help make that happen?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think it comes down to trust and mutual. And that comes with agents getting out there, going around, even when they don't have a buyer, and meeting these on-site sales agents, getting to know them and helping develop that trust. You don't have to wait till you have a client in your car to do that.
Right. Right. It's the trust and it's the communication. And what I would also think now, since so much communication is happening via Zoom, what a great opportunity to have the agent and the buyer and the site agent all together and make sure that we're all kind of like working together and taking care of their questions together. So there's not any miscommunication. I just think that's a perfect opportunity for that. And when we do it face to face, you get a greater commitment level, and you also can read what's going on a whole lot more easily than when you're just on the phone. So I think that's a great opportunity that will come out of this whole COVID scenario. Okay, Nathan, Brian, Cheryl, any other thoughts on that?
Just that we do educate our on-site sales agents to speak with the realtor, and because a lot of times you as the realtor have that insider information, and we can, come together to make it work for your customer. So we do want to reach out to you first, but we do also want to be able to reach out to your customer. So we train to say, hey, I'm going to call them now, and then that's where we get permission.
Yeah. Very good.
It is really about all the relationship and just information and communication. It is all about the back and forth.
Right. It absolutely is. I'm going to move to a question or two from the group. Let's see. So one question that came up was, had to do with preferred lenders. And a lot of times agents want to use their preferred lenders and brokers want to use their preferred lenders. What thoughts do you have about this? Who on the builder side wants to take that one?
I'm fine. I mean, from a builder perspective, we do have our own lenders our own lender, like with Mattamy, we have our preferred lender that we use. And so that is part of our company, and it's an affiliated business. So it's part of the business structure. So we offer incentives to use our lender. And so it is in that scenario very one-sided in that, we are going to offer incentives to use our
Sure.
process and our lender. And if you are going to use your own, you're more than welcome to, but we're not going to give you an incentive to go use a different lender.
I also think that, we have our own lender too. And by, we offer incentives to use them, but the benefit of using our lender is it definitely makes the process a little easier transaction for the buyer. I think it simplifies and streamlines that. So when it's an outside lender and a lender that's not affiliated, they don't know our processes. And when it's our mortgage company, it just makes it streamlined for the buyer.
Yeah.
I don't think most realize that, but it is all about the internal communication. We have more control over that process. We've got Park Square Homes Mortgage, and we meet with them, almost daily. If there's a program that we can't be competitive, we don't offer, or something that we, is truly in the best interest of the buyer, we can't provide, we'll take a look at that. Sometimes we will still make an exception to give, some closing costs, extenuating circumstances, but typically it is, with using our in-house lender.
Sure. It helps keep the process a lot more streamlined for everybody. And we're all trying to save time. So when we do that, it certainly keeps things from falling through the cracks. A similar question is we have a question that says, that this agent often helps first-time home buyers who have qualified for first-time home buyer assistance programs, and she doesn't know how to handle this question at times. And I think that question has to do with, is that something that we can, that you can handle? Or is that a product you can handle as builders?
As far as the program, the first-time homebuyer program?
Homebuyer assistance program.
Yeah, I mean, if it's like Cheryl said, if it's a program that is not offered by our mortgage company and it's in the best interest of the buyer, it is definitely something that we can review and make a decision at that point if, allowing them for a particular program with an outside lender.
Okay, yeah. All right, let's see. I'm going to, some of these questions are questions we've answered. Here's a question. Do new construction homes usually appraise for their price? What if they don't? Is the builder willing to come down? On the builder side, who'd like to take that one?
I could take it. As far as appraisals, typically, we're going to sell 700 homes this year, and realistically, 10 homes may have appraisal problems. I mean, when it's all said and done, everyone's looked at individually. I think some buyers, a lot of times, if you're adding pools, you have a lot of options added to a home, we could have an appraisal issue. But typically, we have homes. We build a variety of homes, and every community ranges in price. Even in the same community, the same home, same floor plan could have $100,000 difference due to the options that are added per the home. So really, appraisals aren't an issue, and we typically will review them on an individual basis every time and make a decision if it's something that we feel is a good appraisal and not, just not given without having comps for, or we try to catch it up front. If someone's adding a ton of options up front, our design center will communicate with us and we'll have a conversation with the customer up front.
Yeah, makes sense. Cheryl, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. We try and, curtail that up front too, while they're at the design center. If we see that, just have that communication with them, let them know that this potentially could happen, give them kind of a heads up. But there's a lot of different variables that go into it. And as, as Brian said, same home, same community. It could be a bad appraisal. There's different circumstances, but they're usually one-offs, not a very common occurrence at all.
Right.
They do happen.
Yeah, I will say, similar to what you were saying, Brian, in my experience, a lot of times when the appraisals came in low, it was because the buyer had made some high-end selections, design center selections, or added a pool or a fence or something like that most other buyers didn't. And so the appraiser was unable to provide ample value for that, and it caused, you know, the reduced appraisal. So thank you for your info on that. Here's another question that came in, I think is you know, something that a lot of agents ask, and the question is, do you recommend having the buyer do an outside third-party inspection or a pre-drywall or pre-closing inspection to the builder group?
Well, I would say on that one, with all the inspections that we go through in the building process, we typically advise the buyer that, you know, you're more than welcome to have your own inspection done, but in reality, all of those things have been checked. And over the years, I've never had any inspection done that had anything other than, oh, that light switch, you know, was wrong, which we would have caught anyway on a walkthrough. So very small things come from that. But we do, if you want it, you're more than welcome to. And then part of our process is we have a pre-drywall walk with the buyer no matter what, so that they get to be there and see that, so, and talk through all the pieces that are under the walls.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense.
I agree with that too. It's peace of mind for the buyer for the few $100s that it costs to have an inspection done. We don't mind it at all if they have an inspection. Like Nathan said, they're typically always minor things and it's very simple. But if you're spending, you know, $300,000-$400,000 on a home, for the buyer to spend $400 for an inspection or whatever that is, it's probably peace of mind and it's worth it for the buyer.
Just say something here real quick, like from a realtor standpoint, we definitely recommend a home inspection that the buyer is paying for. That way everyone has peace of mind. They know that they've had someone look at it from, you know, their point of view. It's like having an agent representing the buyer. Okay, you've got an inspector that's looking out for the buyer's standpoint. And it is, you know, it's very minor items for the most part, but again, everyone has peace of mind. It was done, and no one has to then second guess. Or then, you know, what happens too is like you close on a property and then you hear from someone say, oh, by the way, did you have a home inspection? They go, no, my realtor didn't tell me. You know, that's just another one of those things that I feel like should be part of the realtor's checklist to mention that. And that way, that's one more thing that, again, as a professional, you're giving advice for them to do that, whether they take it or not, but you've offered it.
Sure.
We certainly don't mind it either. We just ask that it's communicated and that, you know, arrangements and appointment is set with the builder so that they can be there on site when the inspector shows up as well.
Yeah, makes good sense. I'm going to just take one or two other questions here. And here's a good question from Rose Mays, a question about contracts. And with contract signing going to electronic signatures, which we're seeing that a whole lot more, there seems to be fewer one-on-one explanations of the contract with buyers. How are builders addressing this with their teams? And I can see this being something we already talked about how it's a different contract than what the agents are as familiar with. So what are builders doing to try to address this with their sales teams?
So as far as MI, I mean, I can tell you that I've asked my team to have basically a time for the buyer to preview the contract, whether it's send it to them beforehand, look at it, ask any questions, and then go from there. I mean, I agree that there's a lot less face-to-face these days, right, between the salesperson and the buyer because of technology. So there is, you know, there is some communication that I feel that's lacking regarding the contract, but my team does a pretty good job at least explaining the main things that are in the contract to help the buyer understand what they're going to be required to do over the next 6 to 7 months. So, but definitely that, you know, previewing it beforehand is something that helps.
Yeah. Yeah,
we do the same thing at Park Square, and just because the contract is electronic doesn't mean that that interaction isn't taking place and going through the contract, whether it's in person or via Zoom or online. It's just a matter of going through the contract with the buyer and making sure that they're comfortable and all of their questions are being answered, and then they have the ease of electronically signing it and sending it back. So it's really just the facilitation of it, not so much the lack of communication.
Right. Right. I like what you said, Brian, too, is a lot of times what they can do is schedule an appointment, just like they would schedule a contract appointment, right? And they would just review the purchase agreement and go through the highlights of it, maybe not all 60 pages, but but the highlights of it, you know, to make sure that they know what they're signing and be able to answer any questions. And if they've already reviewed it in advance, then they're more prepared with their questions. So I think that's a good way to handle it. Well, as we're coming down the home stretch here on time, I wanted to ask the panelists here, if, we're here to try to bridge gaps, right? And try to, create bridges between realtors and builders. And I wanted to open it up for a minute and just see, does anybody have any other particular challenge that you've seen that we haven't already discussed that you want to just give us a minute and talk about the challenge and then the solution that you might recommend. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Or have we covered most everything?
I think
really
we've covered.
I was going to say, really, if there's any questions that come up, just communicating and asking, because the realtor community is incredibly important to us, and valued and respected, and integral part of our business. We're all looking to continue to grow and foster those relationships. So if there's ever any question that as you're going through the process with your builder and your buyer, just throw up the flag and ask, because usually it's a simple question and it's been experienced before. It's not something that we haven't seen or heard before.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yeah, it's communication, isn't it, guys? It's communication is what forges the partnerships. And I always recommended that the agents, if they could, to contact the site agent first and say, hey, I'm going to be coming out with the Tuckers on XYZ day. I want, can you set aside some time for us? My buyer is looking for XYZ, and they're concerned about PDQ, and and let's see what we can do to work together to try to help them find a home. And it's nice when we do have that communication up front, and then if they're because that just starts things off on a much more positive foot. So then we work together as partners, helping these people find a home that works best for them. And I know that can be done because it's been done many, many times, and you all have done plenty of it, right?
Yeah.
So,
another thing too, to keep that momentum going in with what you just said, is to make sure that the, in talking with the on-site sales consultants, to have them put you on their distribution list. So you get their emails with all updated and current information, okay? And again, it's just keeping it top of mind, and that just, makes you more familiar. And once you go out and see the communities, visit the actual models, you visually now have that, in your mind. And as you're talking to clients, to me anyway, I can get more excited about talking about a home and the community and the amenities and what's around it and what's going on. This is you have to invest some time and self-educate yourself.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Very true. Well, thank you. Thank you to everybody, Marie and Rick from the agent side, Brian with MI, Nathan with Mattamy, Cheryl with Park Square Homes. Thank you to you all for being part of this panel. We've gotten a lot of comments that it's been very, very helpful. And I hope that this has helped to bridge the gap and create partnerships, or at least the beginning of some more partnerships between the realtors and the builders, so that we can, work together, take care of our customers, and sell more homes. And hopefully a year from now, we'll look back and say, wow, this was a great start to a terrific to building some really great success. And thank you to Lauren and the SMC with the home builders, and then also to Grace and the Greater Tampa Realtor Association for putting this together. And I appreciate everybody's candid and very professional responses. But I think we got into some tough topics, and I think it was really helpful. So thank you to everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. All right.
Happy new home
Have
selling.
a great day.